Cheaper by the Dozen wasn't just a family comedy. The man behind the camera, Shawn Levy, was quietly testing the exact comedic DNA he'd eventually use to save the MCU with Deadpool and Wolverine 20 years later. While the movie sold a dream of a big, happy family, some of the kids in that set were navigating an industry that didn't have a safety net. One of the kids nearly didn't survive the experience, but we'll get there. These are 20 secrets behind Cheaper by the Dozen. Number 20. Steve Martin invented the meat prank, and then had to stand there and pretend he didn't. In the actual film, after Hank's underwear gets soaked in raw hamburger and the dog goes absolutely feral on him, Tom Baker looks at his kids and goes, "Soaking his underwater in meat? How did they come up with that?" Steve wrote that prank, and he's standing there delivering that line knowing full well that he is the one who came up with soaking a man's underwear in meat.
Release the hound.
You have a dark gift, Sarah Baker.
Decades of performing and the man is still pulling off a straight face for that. Now speaking of people getting pranked. Number 19. The fake Oprah interview sequence. The one where the TV crew shows up at the Baker house, those aren't random actors playing a camera crew. That is the cast from Ashton Kutcher's show Punk'd. Wait, the very show that had America convinced celebrities were getting genuinely ambushed on camera supplied the crew playing the fake Oprah team. And Ashton Kutcher is also in this film, as Hank, the boyfriend whose underwear gets soaked in meat. His Punk co-star, Dax Shepard, is also here, playing one of the camera crew. Listed in the credits, named character, very much on purpose. So in this movie, the guy who ran a prank show is playing a character getting pranked. The whole thing is one big layered bit. Most of us watched it in 2003, having absolutely no idea. Number 18. Jared Padalecki originally auditioned to play Charlie Baker, the lead teen, the role Tom Welling plays.
Hi. Charlie Baker.
Oh yeah, Tom Baker's boy.
If you know Jared, you know him as Sam Winchester. 15 seasons of Supernatural, one of the longest-running genre shows in TV history. In 2003, he was coming off Gilmore Girls, and this could have been his breakout theatrical moment. He left the role to film a pilot called Young MacGyver, which was never picked up. Look, he gave up the lead in the Christmas blockbuster for a pilot that didn't exist 6 months later. That is the specific kind of Hollywood heartbreak that every actor who has ever passed on something to chase the next thing understands immediately. But here's the part. Tom Welling, who had taken the role, called Jared personally. The director needed someone who could actually look Tom Welling in the eye. Since Welling is 6'3", that immediately eliminated most of Hollywood. Jared, at 6'4", was one of the few people who could pull it off. Which makes it one of the rare scenes in 2000 cinema where Clark Kent genuinely looks like the smaller guy in the room.
I guess he's the funniest guy in the herd.
Sam Winchester making Clark Kent uncomfortable in a family comedy, completely uncredited. Number 17. Before Steve Martin's was Tom Baker, the studio was circling a list that reads like a Who Had the Biggest Family Comedy Energy in 2003 competition. Tom Hanks, Robin Williams, Mel Gibson, Tim Allen, Kurt Russell. Tim Allen was already deep into the Santa Claus era, so that almost makes too much sense. Tom Hanks would have made you cry in the parking lot. Steve ended up being the one.
Oh! Pasta della crotch!
It worked because it felt specific. Not every actor on that list could have played that particular flavor of, I have too many children and I thought I was doing fine. Number 16. Tom Welling was 25, playing a high school student trying to get a college scholarship. At the same time, it was Clark Kent on Smallville.
Smallville? What are you doing here?
Also in high school, also navigating teenage life on one of the biggest shows on television, he was doing both simultaneously. 2 different fictional high schools, 2 different networks. The casting a grown adult as a teenager tradition in Hollywood is so normalized that nobody blinked. The illusion held completely on both shows, at the same time, which is either impressive or slightly unhinged depending on how you look at it. Number 15. Neither Steve nor Bonnie Hunt had children of their own when this film was made.
Brazilian mud viper. She gets 1 live rat a week. You can only put on so much lip gloss, princess!
For Steve, that's a genuine blank. No frame of reference for the physical and psychological rhythm of parenting 12. For Bonnie, the story is different. She's one of 7 children, raised in a blue-collar Catholic household in Chicago. She didn't need a research trip to understand what a house full of kids actually feels like. She grew up in one. What she didn't have was the parents' perspective, the specific exhaustion of being the one responsible for all of it, rather than the one causing chaos inside it. In that distinction, knowing the energy from the inside as a kid, but having to translate it into the parent who's barely holding everything together, is exactly what makes her performance feel so specific. She wasn't performing a type, she was working from memory and flipping the vantage point. And look, the kids noticed. Alyson Stoner said years later that Bonnie Hunt was one of the most beautiful human beings on planet Earth in that set, and she created a nurturing, maternal presence for every single kid in the cast. Number 14. Shawn Levy is in the movie. He plays a reporter. Background scene, quick, easy to miss entirely if you're not looking for it. But yes, the director gave himself a small role and then continued on with his life as though nothing happened. Wait, what makes this land differently in 2026 is where Shawn went next. This film, then its sequel, then The Night at the Museum trilogy, then Free Guy, The Adam Project, and then Deadpool and Wolverine, which became one of the highest grossing films ever made. The person who cast himself as an uncredited background reporter in a Christmas family comedy is currently one of the most commercially powerful directors on the planet. He was right there the whole time and none of us clocked it. Number 13. The Baker kids grew up, and the cast list for this movie is genuinely insane to read in retrospect. Hilary Duff was already a Disney icon. Lizzie McGuire had made her unavoidable. And 2003 was her pivot year,
I think I should be allotted at least 5 extra minutes in front of the mirror.
3.
Done.
proving she could anchor a theatrical film that wasn't built around her existing brand. Alyson Stoner played Sarah Baker, the one who masterminds every prank.
I'm going to Dylan's birthday party. Who's with me? Yeah!
If you only know the career highlights, Step Up, Camp Rock, and a decade of Disney Channel, one of the more thoughtful voices talking about what child stardom actually does to people, that's the version the press junket gave you. Look, here's the one nobody talked about on the press tour. By 17, Alyson was in rehab for an eating disorder. Her team kept sending auditions while she was on bed rest. She said later, had she gone any later, she might not have made it.
Is anybody besides me thinking our happier and stronger life was actually code for nastier and suckier?
The set that looked like chaos from the outside, that was the safe part. It was everything the industry did to her after the camera stopped that nearly broke her. And the fact that she's here, running a podcast called Dear Hollywood, building something from what she survived, that's the ending this movie never filmed. Number 12. Years after the film, several of the Baker kids found each other again, which sounds like a sweet postscript, but is actually kind of telling about what that set must have been like. Nah, you don't voluntarily recreate scenes from a film you made as a child, unless something about that experience actually stuck.
I guess you could say that when Tom and I left Midland, we had a mess of theories about how to raise children. We still have a mess of children, but no theories.
Most productions people move on from. This one apparently made people want to go back. For a movie that was built on chaos and improvisation and pointing cameras at kids doing unpredictable things, that tracks. That kind of filmmaking creates something that feels different to the people inside it. Number 11. The Baker family's Evanston home. The giant Victorian with a turret that the second half of the film is set in is a real building. A 3-story 1890s Queen Anne Victorian at 357 Lorraine Boulevard in the Windsor Square neighborhood of Los Angeles. In 2016, Kat Von D bought the house for $6.5 million, and spent 6 years restoring it to what she described as its original Gothic aesthetic. Wait, blood red exterior, black interiors, a blood red pool, Gothic furniture throughout all 12,500 square feet. The cheerful white family home where the Bakers at Christmas dinner is now, essentially, a Victorian mansion that looks like it was designed by someone who takes Halloween very seriously. Kat sold it in 2022 for $15 million. The listing noted, no expense was spared in the meticulous restoration. That's the version of the house that exists now. It raises the question of how many horror films could have been made in the same building. Number 10. One of the most touching character moments in the film happened because a 7-year-old actor got attached to a prop. Forrest Landis played Mark Baker, the isolated middle child who carries his pet frog Beans through most of the movie. In the script, the frog was a plot device for a couple of quick jokes, but during the long hours on set, Forrest genuinely fell in love with the live frogs the animal handlers brought in. He refused to put them down between takes. He snuggled them in the margins of scenes that had nothing to do with the frog. Shawn Levy noticed, and he kept the cameras rolling on those quiet, unscripted moments. Look, what ended up on screen is a kid who actually loves the animal he's holding. The frog became the emotional anchor of Mark's entire storyline, not because the script built it that way, but because a child actor on a long shooting day formed a genuine attachment to a prop animal and a director was paying attention.
Beans was a good frog.
Number 9. Steve's career position in the early 2000s is more interesting than people remember. He was critically respected, genuinely loved, obviously talented, but his connection to audiences with the young kids had softened since the late 80s. He wasn't the automatic family film draw he'd once been. Studios were rushing to put him in the lead of their big Christmas release. Cheaper by the Dozen changed that overnight. Number 1 opening weekend, nearly 5 times the budget in return, and suddenly, Steve was the anchor of the early 2000s family comedy era. Freaky Friday the same year, The Haunted Mansion, Christmas with the Cranks, Cheaper by the Dozen 2 in 2005. One film, career repositioned entirely. That doesn't happen often, and it happened here. And it wasn't just Steve. Jared, 15 seasons of Supernatural, Tom Welling, 6 more years of Smallville. Dax Shepard, who plays one of the camera crew, now hosts one of the most downloaded podcasts in the world. The background players in this movie went on to have more cultural footprint than most lead actors. It's a genuinely strange thing to look at when you put it all together. Number 8. The film cost $40 million to make and earned $190 million worldwide. On Christmas Day 2003, it was competing with The Last Samurai and The Return of the King, both enormous films, and it still opened at number 1. For context and how the industry reads these numbers, Daddy Daycare came out the same year. Similar premise, Eddie Murphy, similar family comedy energy, made $164 million on a $60 million budget.
Wow, goats really love pie.
If people let your kids come here, they're gonna be miserable in 4 different languages.
5. We start Portuguese in the fall.
2 films, both massive, both about chaotic dads managing too many children. Look, Hollywood saw those numbers and greenlit a sequel before the theatrical run even finished. Cheaper by the Dozen 2 came out December 2005, made $138 million, and the formula ran until the industry had squeezed every drop out of it, which is honestly the most Hollywood outcome possible. And if you were a kid in 2003 or 2004, you felt those decisions every Christmas. The kids want to watch something Friday night. That particular era of family comedy, that is the film's actual cultural footprint, not just the box office, the template. Number 7. Most people watching in 2003 didn't know the Bakers were real. The film is based on the 1948 memoir Cheaper by the Dozen by Frank Bunker Gilbreth Jr. and Ernestine Gilbreth Carey, 2 actual children of Frank Bunker Gilbreth Sr. and Lillian Muller Gilbreth. Real family, real book, real 12 kids. The memoir was a bestseller. Funny, specific, warm in the way that only lived experience produces. It became a film in 1950, and then it became the 2003 version, which kept the name, the number 12, and basically nothing else. Wikipedia's current description of the 2003 film notes, in what I consider an extremely diplomatic sentence, that outside of a passing mention of the Gilbreth name, the film has little connection with the original source material. A passing mention, barely a nod. The Gilbreths are in this movie the way your great-grandmother is in a story that started with her but is now mostly about someone else. Hold on, wait, because what the real Gilbreths actually did for a living makes the football coach swap even stranger than it sounds. And there's a version of this film that almost kept it. That's the next one. Number 6. Okay, so that dog food moment, let's actually talk about it. Shawn Levy ran a set loose enough that the kids' actual reactions drove the scene more than the script did. Look, what ended up on screen, the sheer scale of the mess, the sliding, the genuine exhaustion on Steve Martin's face, went well beyond what was choreographed. Levy kept the cameras rolling because what the kids were doing had that specific texture of chaos that you cannot manufacture. The kind anyone who grew up with siblings recognizes immediately. That, oh no, someone's actually going to get hurt energy. The scripted version didn't make the cut. The version that did had something the writers couldn't put on the page. Number 5. The real father was not a football coach. Frank Gilbreth Sr. was an efficiency expert, one of the early pioneers of motion study and industrial engineering. He and his wife Lillian, who was one of the first female industrial engineers in America, were genuinely obsessed with finding better ways to do things. The real tension in the memoir is this fascinating clash between systematic thinking and the fundamental chaos of being a large family. Wait, Lillian wasn't just tagging along. She was one of the first women in America to earn a PhD in industrial psychology. She pioneered ergonomics, and she designed the foot pedal trash can and the refrigerator door shelves, things that are in every kitchen in the world right now, in 2026, that you use without thinking about. The real mom in the story is one of the most quietly influential engineers in American history. The 2003 film turned her into a woman writing a book about having 12 kids. which is fine, but knowing what you actually built makes the swap feel genuinely funny. They applied efficiency systems to their home life, had family meetings with structured agendas, taught their kids Morse code to save time. The 2003 film turned that into a football coach who's distracted by his career. Relatable, totally fine, and approximately as different from the source material as you can get, while technically still using the same title. And here's where it gets interesting. Stay with me, because this is a thing that reframes the whole movie. Number 4. The 2003 film is a remake. Most people who watched it had no idea.
It's okay, Dad. I think you can make it.
I know I can make it. Hold out your hand.
There Was a Cheaper by the Dozen in 1950, directed by Walter Lang, starring Clifton Webb and Myrna Loy. It followed the Gilbreth family much more closely.
Certainly looks like him. It is. He's the lifeguard.
The real setting, the real father's actual job, the real period. It was a hit. Got a sequel the next year called Bells in Their Toes. The 2003 version didn't market itself as a remake at all. Same title, same number of children, complete reinvention of everything else. It's the kind of move that works perfectly. You get the brand recognition without the expectation of faithfulness. Most of your audience is too young to have seen the 1950 original anyway. Before the final 3, did you know the real mother in this story invented the foot pedal trash can? Subscribe if you're new. We do this for every film that was stranger and more accidental than it looks. Number 3. The earliest drafts held more of the real Gilbreths. Traces the efficiency expert dynamic, a grounded period tone. As development continued, those got stripped from the modernized football coach premise the studio needed to sell in 30 seconds on Christmas Day. Efficiency expert applies Gilbreth motion study principles to domestic life in the 1920s is a pitch you have to explain. And the people explaining it are trying to sell it to a family who just drove 40 minutes to a multiplex. Look, what's interesting is what that rewrite process kept. Not the setting, not the job, not the era, the emotional core, which turns out to be harder to remove than any of the details. Number 2. What survived every draft, every studio note, every modernization was the actual emotional core of the Gilbreth story. A large family under genuine pressure, parents who love their kids but are slowly realizing they cannot be everything to everyone simultaneously. Kids who act out, not because they're bad, but because they need more of their parents than their parents have left to give. There's a moment near the end of the film where Mark has run away and the whole family scatters to find him. And in that scene, you can feel the real Gilbreths underneath all the updated packaging.
Baker ancestors.
Yeah, I mean, without you, we wouldn't be the 12 bakers anymore.
The thing the memoir was actually about. Not the efficiency systems, not the period detail, the specific weight of a family that is too big for any one person to hold all at once, but somehow holds together anyway. That's not a studio invention. That's the book. That's what survived. Number 1. The Baker family felt real because so many of the moments actually were. A cast of child actors who'd never met produced something that looked like actual siblings, and several of them genuinely stayed connected years after. And one of them, the one who made the pranks feel real, the one who had the best comedic timing of any kid in that set, spent years after this film fighting to stay alive. She said so herself. And the fact that she's here, and talking, and writing about it, is its own kind of ending the movie never earned but somehow deserves. A film built on a reimagined, modernized, studio-shaped version of a real 1920s family somehow kept capturing something true. Look, that's not easy to do on purpose. This one did it mostly by accident. Which is, when you think about it, exactly what the Gilbreths would have called an inefficient but effective process. Drop a comment with which Baker kid you were most like growing up. Now if you want to see a literal masterclass in survival, you need to check out our video on Mel Gibson's Apocalypto next. Same energy of a man desperately trying to get back to his kids, just slightly higher stakes than a dog food prank.
Phase 1 complete.